Once upon a time in a small town, there lived a peculiar family. The family consisted of a father, his son, and his daughter, Jessica. Jessica was a beautiful and curious young woman. She was known for her wild and unpredictable nature, often getting herself into unusual situations. One sunny afternoon, Jessica's brother, Mark, was home from college for the summer. He was sitting on the porch, enjoying the warmth, when he saw Jessica walking down the street, wearing nothing but a trench coat. She was carrying a large trash bag and a pair of handcuffs. Mark found this strange, but he didn't think much of it, as Jessica was always up to something. As Jessica reached the end of the street, she ducked into an alleyway. A few minutes later, Mark heard a commotion coming from the alley. Curious, he grabbed his gun and went to investigate. When Mark arrived at the alley, he found his sister, Jessica, standing naked in a trash bin. She was handcuffed and surrounded by a crowd of men who were taking pictures and laughing. Jessica looked embarrassed and scared. Mark pointed his gun at the men and demanded, "What are you doing? Leave her alone!" The men, startled, began to back away. As they did, Mark noticed a badge on one of the men's jackets. He was a cop. The cop, seeing the gun in Mark's hand, tried to calm the situation. "Put the gun down, son. We're here to help your sister." Mark hesitated, but finally lowered his weapon. The cop approached Jessica and tried to help her out of the trash bin. As she stepped out, Mark saw that she was wearing a G-string and pasties. "Jessica, what are you doing?" Mark asked, confused and concerned. Jessica looked at the ground, ashamed. "I don't know, Mark. I woke up this morning with the urge to do something wild and exciting. I guess I went a bit too far." The cop, who introduced himself as Officer Johnson, said, "Your sister was causing a scene in the street, and I was called to the scene. When I arrived, she asked me to cover her up and called you." Mark sighed. "Thank you, Officer Johnson. I appreciate your help." Officer Johnson nodded and handed Mark a business card. "If you ever need help or have any questions, don't hesitate to call me." As they walked back to Jessica's house, Mark asked, "What's going on, Jess? Why did you ask that man to cover you up?" Jessica looked at Mark, her eyes filled with shame. "I don't know, Mark. I just wanted to feel free, I guess. But when I got into the trash bin, I realized how embarrassing and dangerous it was. I didn't know what to do, so I asked the first man who walked by to cover me up and call you." Mark hugged his sister. "I'm just glad you're safe. I don't want anything bad to happen to you." When they arrived at Jessica's house, they were shocked to find their father, Mr. Thompson, sitting in the living room, wearing a ski mask and holding a duffel bag full of money. It was clear that he was involved in some sort of criminal activity. Mark, furious, pointed his gun at his father. "What are you doing, Dad? How could you involve yourself in something like this?" Mr. Thompson, fearful and ashamed, tried to explain himself. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I got involved with a criminal gang a few months ago. They threatened to hurt you and Jessica if I didn't cooperate. I didn't know what to do." Jessica, still shaken from her ordeal, began to cry. "Why didn't you tell us, Dad? We could have helped you." Mr. Thompson hung his head. "I was ashamed, and I didn't want to put you two in danger. I thought I could handle it on my own." Mark lowered his gun, realizing that his father had been manipulated by the gang. He knew that they needed to work together to put an end to the gang's activities and protect their family. Officer Johnson, who had been watching the whole scene from a distance, stepped forward. "I'm glad you're all safe now. Let's work together to bring these criminals to justice." Over the next few weeks, Mark, Jessica, and their father worked closely with Officer Johnson and the police department to gather evidence against the criminal gang. They discovered that the gang was involved in a variety of illegal activities, including human trafficking, drugs, and weapons. Mark, using his gun and his military training, helped the police orchestrate a daring raid on the gang's hideout. The raid was a success, and many members of the gang were arrested. However, the leader of the gang, a ruthless man named Carlos, managed to escape. Determined to bring Carlos to justice, Mark and Officer Johnson tracked him down to a remote location on the outskirts of town. In a tense standoff, Mark and Officer Johnson confronted Carlos and his remaining gang members. Carlos, seeing that he was cornered, laughed and said, "You think you can stop us? We've been doing this for years, and no one has been able to stop us." Mark, standing firm, replied, "You're right. But now we have a reason to stop you. We have families and loved ones who are counting on us to put an end to your criminal activities." In the ensuing firefight, Mark and Officer Johnson were able to take down Carlos and his gang members. The town was finally safe from their grasp. Back at home, the Thompson family was reunited and stronger than ever. Mr. Thompson had turned himself in and was facing the consequences of his actions. Jessica had learned a valuable lesson about her need for attention and the risks of pushing boundaries. Mark had discovered the importance of family and the responsibility that comes with protecting those you love. As for Officer Johnson, he became a close friend of the Thompson family. He continued to watch over the town, ensuring that it stayed safe from harm. And as for the town itself, it would never forget the brave actions of Mark, Jessica, and Officer Johnson, who had risked everything to bring justice and peace to their community.
Please subscribe to my channel Lessons of Life and press the bell notification icon.